Hello, everybody. Hi, everybody. This is Beth Ruske. I'm with Tiara International. I'm one of the managing partners, and I'm here today to be the MC of a very incredibly interesting conversation that we've been having. Joining us today are two of my business partners, Andrea Henning and Peg Rowe. Andrea is the managing partner in our European offices, and she's headquartered in the Netherlands. And Peg here is in Chicago in the United States. And Peg oversees all of our executive coaching practice and our corporate work as well. And she's involved in our corporate work. The third guest we have with us today is incredible. He's an incredible man who's done an incredible body of work. David Bancroft-Turner. David, you got too many names in that. So joining us is David Bancroft-Turner, and David has worked with this collection of content, this political intelligence concept for over 20 years. And he's the founder of the Academy for Political Intelligence. And David is joining us from the UK today. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to the conversation today. We'll have a collection of accents on this call. That's good. And just for sake of formatting, we're going to come on and off mute just to kind of keep things flowing. Dave, I'm going to ask you to start. And, this is storytelling, so I'm not interviewing the three of you, as you know. But when people say political intelligence, like what kind of reactions do you get? And let's just start there.
Well, it's a good question, Beth, because the answer is normally very, very mixed. If I go back into the mists of time, when I first developed all of the materials and the diagnostic tools that we have around political intelligence, I had a stand for a couple of years at a training and development exhibition, and I would be stopping people walking past my stall to talk to them about the subject of organizational politics, and I had some very strange reactions. At one end, I had people who would literally run away from me shouting, "Leave me alone, leave me alone," to other people who, I guess the most extreme version was a lady. I stopped and I said, "Could I talk to you about a training program that I've developed on the subject of organizational politics, and we turn what is a negative for many people into a positive?" And she said, are you for real? Are you serious? And I said, "Yes, I am." And she threw her arms around me and she gave me a great big hug. And she said, "I've been looking for you all of my life." Now, those are two extreme reactions, and we get a lot of reactions everywhere in between. It's a subject that not many people really know how to discuss. They don't tend to have the language or the structure. I know a lot of people suffer from the effects of organizational politics, and what we've done, and I'm very proud of the fact that we've done this, which is to create a process that really helps to reframe organizational politics and to help people to manage the political landscape, typically in large organizations, whether they be public or private. And of course, I'm talking about politics with a small p.
Yeah.
Talking about the sort of behavior that we experience from ourselves and our colleagues in the workplace. I'm not going to be discussing the White House or the Houses of Parliament or anything like that. I think there are other people much more qualified than I am to help people. But organizational politics, I know a lot of people suffer as a result of the political environment in their workplace. And my passion and my job and my role and why I get up in the morning is to really help people to manage that political landscape and to do something about it in a really positive way.
Well, I know we at Tiara are absolutely delighted that you created the body of work. We've been working with it now, and we really think it's critical, not just for all leaders, but for women. So Peg and Andrea, why don't you guys chime in terms of what attracted us to this? Why do we think it's important? Why do we think it's important for women? Why now?
And Dave, can come with your next storytelling, because I was one of the people when you were talking about organization and politics. I was thinking, I wasn't saying it out loud, like, oh, that's not for me, for heaven's sake, politics. So, and also the thought, like, I don't want to be political. And I don't know if you read my minds, but somehow you said something that made me realize, okay, that this belief, I'm not political, really, really brought me into trouble. And this is actually what I see coaching a lot of women. They don't want to be political, so-called, but it's the negative connotation, the suffering from the environment that they are talking about. And I think you also have seen that, and maybe we'll elaborate on the political animal model later, that you find a lot of women in a certain quadrant, and that also was shocking. So I thought, I get better certified in the material.
Peg, you've got a lot of experience around this, and and that's the other thing is, there isn't a woman we talk to that can't cite awful politics that have actually kept her out of something.
Right.
So Peg, share a little bit more about your.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I echo both Dave and Andrea in terms of having that polarity of the negativity, and that really being sort of stuck in my mind that that's what politics was. So I didn't even have a frame of reference that it could be positive. So when I first started my career from a corporate perspective, I was definitely in the camp of, I don't want to do politics. I denied politics. It was like, don't ask me to do any part of that. The people in my mind who did that were sneaky and manipulative, and that just wasn't how I wanted to see myself. And so it really felt negative. And what I'm clear about is I wasted a few years not being as effective as I could have been because I wasn't willing to engage. It was kind of that idea of like, you can't play the game if you're not on the field. I took myself right off the field. And I just said, okay, I'm not doing that. And as a result, I diminished my ability to be effective.
Yeah,
at some point along the line, I did understand that there's this idea of how you influence people, and if you want decisions made, that you do, you'll get farther if you talk to people ahead of time, so that they're socialized to the idea. When everyone shows up, they have an idea what you're talking about. So I learned the political intelligence side of the equation from a positive standpoint, but I didn't know that's what it was. I had it completely differently in my mind. It's like, oh, that's something else. That's not politics. And so what I've loved about what Dave's doing is he's helped us see there's a continuum. There's like a way it can show up negatively and a way it can be kind of neutral. And then there's a way that it can be very positive. And I think there are a lot of people who do positive political intelligence and don't recognize that that's what they're doing because they're so used to sort of shoving away the idea of being political. To your other question, Beth, of why for women, it really goes back to this idea of, I think women take themselves out of the game when they don't step into being influential. And as a result, as they sort of push away from it, they diminish their effectiveness in the organization. And they become, they're certainly able to do their jobs, but that elevation of your influence and your ability to make bigger things happen gets diminished because they're not willing to participate.
Yeah, we're talking about organizational politics here, but this is actually something that touches every person, but specifically we're talking about women, every woman in whatever role she has. Because look, if you're running a family, if you're on a committee at your church, you are part of organizations. So, it's not the corporate organization only that we're talking about. These are truly life skills. And if you choose to opt out, you're pretty much opting out of civilization, I think, in a good way. So, the challenge that women have had, Dave, we love to get your perspective. You're not going to mansplain to us well, the challenges women have, but at the same time, give us perspective. You've been playing with this body of work for a long time.
Well, yeah, two things come to mind. I mean, the first is, what was the catalyst for me to spend half of my life really working with this subject? Well, it's very straightforward, and it was driven by a client many years ago who asked me to design what I guess we would term a fairly straightforward influencing skills program for about 500 odd people middle management level in a international bank. Now, this is something that I've done for many years and put together this particular program. But the difference in this program was that we had to present the content of this influencing skills program to the board of the bank in order for it to be accepted. And we made a presentation and all the right noises were made and we got the business and everything was great. But what was fascinating was at the end of that presentation, literally as I was walking out of the boardroom, the marketing director literally grabbed hold of my arm and said to me, look, can I just have a quick word with you? And the quick word I need to have with you is about the fact that all of these people that are going to be going through this influencing skills program, all of that development is going to be wasted if they can't manage the political environment of this bank. So you can have all of the skills in the world. You can be the best communicator. You can be the most influential person. But if you can't manage the political landscape of this hugely political organization, then all of those skills are wasted. So I want you, David Bancroft-Turner, to build something into the program on the subject of organizational politics. Now, this is where it gets a bit scary because like many consultants, when they're asked to do something and they don't really know what the answer is, the word, yes, I can do that, came out of my mouth. On the train on the way home, my business partner said to me, well, when you said that we could build in something on organizational politics, what were you thinking? My response was, well, you know, we just need to partner up with some very skillful people who are into this sort of thing and look at the material that exists out there already and build it into the program. I mean, the dilemma was, this was back in 1997, we looked into the marketplace and there was absolutely nothing. There were some books on the subject of what the Americans call political savvy. Those were quite helpful. There were a lot of other books that were very unhelpful because they talked about politics in the negatively and basically how to do other people in and get away with it. And we designed as much as we could into this influencing skills program. It lasted about 30 minutes. We had to move on because we didn't have any more material. And the feedback and the response from the delegates was so overwhelmingly positive in that we need more on the subject of organizational politics. This is absolutely terrific. And that really was the catalyst to start the body of work that we did and which we've now produced and you've seen the result of that. The women aspect, the second aspect for me, was as a result of quite a lot of single gender development that I've done in my career, particularly, well, not particularly, but obviously for men. I've been connected with female development through many colleagues over many years. And the call was always, well, you know, is there a difference for a man or a woman in the workplace having to deal with organizational politics? And my answer to that over a long period of time was, well, I don't know. So one day I decided that I was going to go and find out. And that led to a piece of research that was published a number of years ago, where I interviewed 452 women from the chief constable of the police force in one of the large counties in the UK to women operating at middle management level. And I categorically proved through that research that the skill level between men and women around organizational politics is exactly the same. It is not about whether one of the genders is more skillful than the other. The difference is in the application of that skill in the workplace. And I want to support what Peg said earlier. We know from the research that I did that many women associate politics with the negative self-serving behavior of primarily men in the workplace. And then women say to themselves, if that's what it's like to be political, I don't want anything to do with it.
Absolutely.
They opt out of organizational politics and then they pay the price. Either in career terms, either in terms of salary, in terms of development, in terms of being influential, in terms of getting access to sexy projects, in terms of getting access to training programs. I could go on and on and on. And that's the big difference between the two. So what I'm really passionate about, because I have 2 daughters and a wife who are all females and have to operate in the corporate market, is to help them and other women understand that by embracing organizational politics and actually using political intelligence in a positive way, that can be good for them, it can be good for their teams, and it can be good for the organization. And that's what I've proved.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's one of the reasons why we love your work and we're absolutely drawn to it, and we're using it and we use it in our influence dimension. So Peg and Andrea, why don't you guys pop in here in terms of, why we see this as really so valuable for women. Peg, specifically, one thought that's occurring for me, I'd like you to take it deeper, is, we hear a knock on women all the time about, well, especially high potential women in organizations.
Yeah.
Oh, they're very good. They're excellent at what they do. They're just not strategic. How does that tag of being not strategic tie in here with the political savvy and the positive political intelligence?
Yeah, I think often when we hear that speaks to many women believing early on in their careers that what they need to do is work really hard and do good work, and that alone will have them be rewarded. So we sometimes call that the competency gap, meaning that they focus so much on being competent in their job that they actually almost don't even pick their head up to look around them. And so when we're seeing influence on the work that we do, it's often the untapped opportunity for women. They're self-aware, they're competent, they do a great job. And the part they've missed is the influence piece, because they're so busy doing their job well, which is, you need to do your job well. So we're not in any way, shape, or form saying don't perform well. But they get so engaged in that they miss the boat in terms of recognizing that there's a huge opportunity for influence. And the thing that we especially love about the work that Dave does is it actually does locate political intelligence right smack dab in the middle of influence. It's right there. And so when we talk about influence, as soon as we heard about the programming, the first thing we said is this fits right into our influence model. And the 2 areas for us that we see women push away from, I say they have an allergic reaction to it, but it's like power and politics are the 2 areas that women tend to sort of like back away from. And those are essential to influence. If you know how to, manage and use and exert your power for good, and you know how to manage the politics of the situation and be smart about it, then your ability to be influential grows exponentially. And so that's really for us what's at the heart of it. It's like, these are essential skills for women to actually wield influence in a positive way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Andrea, talk a little bit, the other thought that I'm hearing that's going on in my head, and it might be in yours too, is that I think women also have this thing about, I can't be an authentic leader and be involved in politics. Like there's some kind of bad equation in their mind that authentic leader does not equal being able to play politics.
Yeah, and I think that is actually tying to what Dave said, that women had to operate in environments, especially in corporations, organizations, that were so hurtful for them. Because as the same thing that goes with being political intelligence or savvy, but not using it, goes with women are equally capable of producing results. However, the way that they do it and the how is differently. And especially if they have been working in an environment where they are also forced into a certain kind of how, because otherwise it would not be noticed, was very hurtful to them. So in my practice, when they then come and being coached, and they discover their authenticity or how they really would love to show up, then they see the discrepancy, and then often the only step that they can figure out for themselves is opting out, because it has been so stressful for them for quite some time. So they had to operate out of their real authenticity because of the how they needed to show up. And what is the amazing thing also when you look at the positive political intelligence, the traits how to be more positive political active is actually what women can do naturally. So it's all about when we then see the whole picture, like that, they also can see like, oh, but actually the way I naturally would do things is the political intelligent thing. Then they can be encouraged to do that more.
Yeah. I think, there's two things we're hearing. One is women are opting out. So they have this visual that it looks a certain way. Politics looks this way, therefore I'm choosing not to have anything to do with it. And as we know, that is clearly hurting their careers and their own growth and development. But I think there's another thing that women, and maybe it's women of a certain age, I'll speak for myself, that we learn how to emulate that politics. So in order to get ahead, we actually did, take on some of those characteristics, and it never felt right. So those two areas seem really big for women, which really is resonating with us. Any other areas that we see, or any other obstacles that we see for women actually understanding the importance of getting in the game?
The one thing that I would add here, Beth, goes back to Dave's research, which I've been fascinated by when you determined that women were equally skillful. And I think the thing that I'm noticing in that is that they may be equally skillful, but they're not equally practiced. So because they've pushed away from politics, they may absolutely have the skills, but they are not as proficient and as facile with using the skills. And they don't tend to want to think that way. So as they've lumped everything into politics and sort of pushed away, even the things that would be perceived as positive, they may not recognize how powerful those tools are, if you will, in the way they get things done. So I think they underutilize sometimes the positive political skills that they have because they're not recognizing them for the value that they have.
Interesting. Peg, you said earlier, if they're not in the game, you just can't win if you're not even in the game. You got to be on the playing field. There's another piece to this that we have found in our work, our body of work with women over the years, and especially professional women in corporations, is that they tend not to know the rules. Like there's nuanced rules around, things. And the funny thing is when they hear political intelligence, they hear, well, so you're going to give me the list of rules, right? You're going to tell me how I'm supposed to do these things. And we're like, no, like the whole point is there are some things, but what we're describing here is it really comes from common sense and really having a strategic approach and following your own intuition. And that's one of the things that we know in our mentoring programs that we create with organizations is that if women know the rules, they can play the game, but there's no set of rules. And every organization is different, and every culture within the organization, every person's got a different approach. So with that in mind, talk more about the way that we're impacting and helping women actually, really take advantage of this, practical things that women might be able to do or look for or seek out, that will just make them more prolific in this space. I'm throwing you a curveball, I know. Guys gonna need to come off mute.
Shall I take that first?
Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
One of the things that strikes me whenever I start working with a new client is that people are very generous, normally, with regard to helping me to understand the vision of the organization, the mission, the values, the sort of things that are written on the wall in terms of what's important for them. At some stage, somebody from HR will normally get out a structure chart and we'll talk about how the organization operates. And for me, all of that information is helpful and a good frame. One of the questions that I really like to ask when I'm starting work with a new client is the question, how does this place really work? And when I ask that question, how does this place really work, I normally get a very different answer from the conversation that we've been having about the vision and the mission and the values and the structure of the organization. Because for me, it's about trying to understand, where is the power in the organization? What are the agendas? What are the issues that are really important for people? What are the things that I really do not need to talk about? In other words, it's the unwritten set of rules that I could quite happily run into and give myself a really, really bad headache if I meet the right person at the wrong time and say the wrong thing. And one of my pieces of advice, I guess, to people is, find out who's been in the organization for quite some time and ask them, what are the rules of this place? Who's in, who's out? Where's the power? Where's the projects with the money? What's the flavor of the month? Who's in? What is the managing director interested in? He or she, what are they not interested in? And I found, actually asking that question, people are incredibly generous and will actually say things like, oh yeah, you mean how this place really works? I'll tell you, yeah. I've been here for 15 years. Let me tell you how it really works. And I've never had anybody refuse me whenever I've asked that question. So the formal side of the organisation, is really, really interesting, but it's the public face. That is not how the organisation makes decisions. That is not how the organisation functions internally. That is not about how you influence the managing director. That is not about how the organisation really works. That's what you've got to find out.
Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of things I'd add to that that were coming to mind when Beth posed the question is, some organizations have formal mentoring programs, others do not. But I think there's some wisdom in advising folks to find a person or two who you can trust to, have these kinds of conversations. Now, here's what I would say from a politically intelligent perspective. If someone I didn't know very well came and asked me the kinds of questions that Dave just did, I would have a question about their motives. So I think you want to have an established, warm relationship before you begin to explore, you've been here a while. How does this place really work? And what are some of the things that are going on? And it's not a one conversation discussion. It's probably going to take time over a period of time. But it feels to me like, one of the things that we would often advise, and I certainly think we do informally advise women and other folks that we coach, is to find, who are those one or two people in the organization that you could really trust to give you the lowdown and to give you feedback as well, so that it becomes this kind of two-way conversation. And it's not just about sort of teasing apart all of the politics, but it's a piece of the conversation overall. The other thing I urge is become a keen observer, like really watch what's going on. Watch what happens when you're in a room and you see decisions being made. What's really happening there? What's the conversation that's happening and what's the conversation that's not happening? And get curious about that as well. So I think if people tune up and get both curious and observant, there's a lot that they can take in on their own without even having to have someone explain it to them. So, I think there's lots of opportunities for people to become more tuned into the politics in a positive way when they're willing to hold it in that frame.
That's great, Peg. And I think that the thing for women is that they have to understand that there's a way to do it in a way that works for them.
Right.
There's a reason to do it, because
Yeah.
you actually are putting obstacles in your own way if you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that we're just now touching on, and I'm glad we saved it for the end, guys, is the definition of politics that we operate with, right?
Right. Yep.
And it's not, the definition of politics is it's not what you do, it's why I think you're doing it.
Right.
Right? So it's not what you're doing, it's why I think you're doing it. So it's all in the frame of the beholder and all in the interpretation. And we've had a lot of rich dialogue this whole week. So any of you chime in for any reason about, the difficulty with that, how some people, can understand that it's, oh, there's a blind spot here, or it's a perspective of somebody else has a different understanding of my intention and my motive, and how tricky that whole landscape is. So this is just fair game for everybody here.
Well,
Maybe Dave,
go ahead.
I was thinking Dave is such a great storyteller, and maybe I'm throwing you a curveball right now, but do you have one story for us, the story that tells it all?
Oh, I wish there was a magic bullet. It would be absolutely wonderful, wouldn't it?
I wish there was a magic pill we could give people to be coachable.
Yeah. Well, two silver bullets come to mind. I'm not sure they're magic bullets or even golden bullets, but a couple of silver bullets come to mind. I mean, for me, there's a huge difference between the formal processes and systems that organizations have and that they show outwardly to the world, as opposed to the informal processes that lead to the decisions that go on internally. And I think it beholds everybody to really understand the difference between the two. I was a senior manager for many years, and then I was fortunate enough to work at board level. And I can honestly say that every time I stood up in the boardroom to make a presentation, I already knew the answer that I was going to get. Now, the fascinating thing about that is how did I already know when I'm going through the formal process of that presentation? Well, it's really simple. I went around the week before, the fortnight before, to the key players, the key decision makers on that particular issue. I'd given them an opportunity to understand what I was going to present. I gave them an opportunity to ask questions, and I was completely open with them in terms of asking them for their support. Now, the question is, other people watching me doing that, is that skillful or is that manipulative? And coming back to your point, Beth, is many times I've had people say to me, wow, Dave, what you did last week, that was amazing. It was so skillful. And the way you got those people on board beforehand, which led to the decision, it's absolutely terrific. And yet other people have said to me, well, I saw you do exactly the same thing. And I think you're incredibly manipulative. And I think I have to be very, very careful at dealing with you in the future because you're not as straight as you appear, Mr. Bancroft-Turner. And I think that's the second dilemma for all of us, is how our behavior can be interpreted in the workplace in the wrong way. And so one of the key bullets, one of the magic bullets, is to be more open and transparent about your motives and where you're coming from and your intentions. And I always remember I worked with a managing director years ago in a very large food manufacturing company who said to me, Dave, one of the things I've learned is that I'm open and transparent with my senior team, but I'm also open and transparent with them about the fact that sometimes I can't be open and transparent. Yeah. So he realized that there were things that he couldn't tell people, but he was open about the fact that he couldn't tell them. And then that immediately stopped all of the gossip, it stopped all of the ideas, it stopped all of the sort of energy going into, oh, I wonder what's going on, is it downsizing, is it more redundancies, blah, 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 blah. So actually divulging where we're coming from and talking about the background motivation of why we're doing what we're doing is something that's incredibly important for all of us.
Yeah, it is. Peg, any last words of wisdom here from you?
I think that this is an ongoing learning. I think you just get better and better at it, and the more you focus on it, the more you increase your depth of understanding and recognize your own blind spots and what it is that people really do need to know and understand, to Dave's point around your motives, your intentions, your context for what you're doing. And I do think when we see people who are resistant to that, they're either intent on being right or they're unwilling actually to examine what their blind spots are. And they make it somebody else's problem. So for those of us who want to continue to grow and develop, this is a really rich place to really explore.
Yeah, it is fantastic. I think being curious, it's, understanding people have, good intentions usually, and
Yep.
come from that place and really allowing that to be the case, but to really just be curious. And the other thing is, I actually think I'm recognizing too, it's not just incumbent upon us to manage how we land, because that's important, of course. I think as receivers and people in the equation, there's always two people involved or more. We've got a responsibility too as the receivers to be asking, what did you mean? I'm just curious. What did you mean by that comment? Boy, things like that, simple things like that can just clarify everything so fast, so easily, and take away any miscommunication. So this is a great conversation. Andrea, anything else you want to add here?
Yeah, that I think the only thing that it really asks from all of us is a willingness to look through a lens, and not hiding behind like, yeah, but my intention is so good. Your intention can be the best intention, but look through the lens how it could be interpreted, and have the willingness to, oh, what if it's true? What if the diagnostics, there's some truth in that? So we need this openness, and often it's uncomfortable because we have this great intention, and we want to come across authentically, and integrity is a really big word in that too. And so it needs a willingness, and it takes courage also to look at yourself and when you look at your profile.
Right. So I'm going to wrap up with the definition that we do love, and it is, politics is not what I do, it's why you think I'm doing it. I'm going to say that again. Politics is not what I do, it's why you think I'm doing it. And it really kind of puts the frame of reference that we've been talking about here all day. This whole body of work is so rich. We're very thankful to David Bancroft-Turner and his partners for the work that they've done over the last 20 plus years. We're absolutely delighted that we're partners in bringing this into the States and bringing this body of work forward. And those of you who are listening to this recording, please know that if you go to the Tiara-leadership.com, there's a special offer that you have that you can take advantage if you're interested in finding out more about how others might be interpreting your behavior politically. So it's a great tool, the assessment you can take, have coaching around it, and we're delighted to bring that to you. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being on the call today, and thank you for listening, and join us again. Bye now.
Bye-bye.